Right, it's 32.
Yeah, so let's get started. So good morning, everybody. My name is Ludo Wijkmans, CEO of XPlus. Welcome in this breakfast after the summer. We have an interesting lineup of speakers today with a very interesting subject. So I hand over to Bart Dubois, who is leading as a partner within XPlus, our academy service line. So Bart, up to you.
Thanks, Ludo. Welcome to this webinar. At XPlus, we hold this series of webinars to provide you interesting information and to share experience on topics which are relevant for architects. And today we are putting the focus on, let's say, the social dynamics within architecture communities. We have two very interesting speakers. We first have Dirk van Boxen, who is Transformation Manager, talking about an architect's perspective on agile organizational principles and concepts. Then followed up by two speakers from ING, both architecture chapter leads, Benoît Moreau and Thierry Parmentier, on their learnings from establishing community working for architects at ING. Just some small practicalities before we start. We have quite a condensed session, so we will this time not have polls. We will rather listen to your questions as you write them into the chat. So feel free to ask questions there. We will try to cover them at the end of the session with the remaining time that is available. But as you know, we try to close at around 9:15. Please stay muted during the webinar, so we do watch the chat and we will bring attention to that at the end. For any additional questions, you can always reach us also via our email address there. And then I would like to give the floor to Dirk van Boxen. Dirk, please take the floor.
Let me try to do this right. You're seeing all my screen, that's okay?
Yes.
So, for the introduction, I have an echo myself. This is a bit annoying. So, he announced me as a transformation manager, and I'm sure why he did that, because nobody knows what a transformation manager is. People with kids know that a transformer is a type of car that can transform itself in a fighting machine. That might be it, but it's also, I think, and that's the subject of today, is I am not an IT architect, and but I did and I do work in IT, and back in 1990 when I was graduated I studied history and economics, and then there was this advertisement in the paper saying IT doesn't have to be about bits and bytes. I said, maybe that's something for me, and I tried to get a job, and I landed the job, so that was okay. And then what did I discover? They were not talking about IT people being people. They talked about users, those strange breed of people that didn't know what technology was, and that as they were opposed to us, real ITers who did understand and who in fact were making the future as we spoke. And with that, both Bart calling me or launching me as a transformation manager, and that first experience, they illustrated the theory of optimal distinctiveness, and this is a key concept of in fact, every human being has a strong need to belong, to be part of something, to be part of a group, and that's the theory, driven by the fact that alone out in the wild we cannot survive. We need to be part of a group in order to survive, and then that's cool, now we're part of the group, but then we also have a strong drive to be different, to be unique, and that's something we need, because otherwise we do not get to reproduce. So we need to stand out as well. So we have always this double tendency to wanting to belong and wanting to be different, to be unique, and that's the theory of optimal distinctiveness by Marilyn Brewer, one of the key concepts in social dynamics. So, and what they did when I started out was clearly saying, okay, there's a group, us ITers, and there's another group, the users. So please, and they invited me to belong and to be unique in their group. Now, this is an individual thing in the end. You have those two drivers, those two needs, and mostly, I do not want to stereotype, but I have been working a lot with architects, and at one point in time I was an architect. Architects tend to be lone riders. They need to be more the differentiating part and the belonging part. But nevertheless, and this is a key point, nobody likes to be alone all of the time. Now, I started in 1990. This was a classical organization, and then somewhere everybody thought, or a lot of people thought, that it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, what does that mean? It means that, well, we need to do something else. And Agile came along, and they came along with tribe and squads and all those things, and the organizational concepts. And the terminology of Agile is very, very, very much focused on the sense of belonging. It draws upon that. It says, well, if you're part of a squad, if you're part of us together as a team, we will make it. That's one of the key concepts of the Agile organization. And there's a set of beliefs that comes with that, which are quite clear. There's a line saying, okay, if you belong to this squad and you really are part, then you will be engaged. And if you're engaged with heart and soul to the matter of the team, to the group that you belong to, then you will have effectiveness, you have productivity, you will have grinta, you will have whatever it takes to do and to bring the results. That's the essence of the Agile organizational structure. They're not alone in that. There is, if you go from Agile, you go, which is an IT delivery, and meanwhile it's everywhere. You have sociocracy type of concepts, all building on the strong belief that power should be distributed. That power is not something that is held at the top, but power is something that you distribute among the different people. And in fact, Agile says it themselves. Agile said there's somewhere very early in the after the manifesto a statement that says the best architectures, the best requirements and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Now, so you have your squad, and your squad is waving at your IT architect, who is not really part of the squad because he does a lot of things, saying the best architecture emerge from a self-organizing team. So this is one view on reality. And then you have this guy. I don't know whether you know this one. It was certainly not an IT person or an IT architect. It's Niccolo Machiavelli. Yeah. Everybody knows the caricature that it's a bad thing to be Machiavelli. But in fact, he lived in Renaissance Italy in the midst of cities fighting against each other, and he observed that he was a very good philosopher, in fact, but there was one statement that I would like to hear, one observation, that is all free governments, and you can replace governments by teams, all free teams have two principal ends, one of which is to preserve their liberties, and the other to enlarge their dominions. Now, this is the power game. This is, okay, I have this team, I have a squad that really wants to maximize its independence, or this division, or whatever it is. And on the other side, you have a fight, you have a conflict. Now, this seems contradictory to that more soft, agile, sociocracy, empowering teams type of world, but in fact, it is not. Both views are a way of looking, are just an angle, a model. That's something that IT architects always like, a model on the complex system that is collective behavior. And in fact, it's all true. It's true that self-organization exists, and there are lots of situations where putting the control and responsibility for core specializations into the hands of the people who are doing the work in order to restore a sense of pride and satisfaction within their work is a very valid option. And I was quoting something from the Spotify model. But on the other hand, we all know that politics are there in an organization. We all know that the power game is also there. So what do we do? What can we do? Well, what Agile tried to do was this. It's trying to do. You have this very strict squads in a tribe, and tribes together in a release train or whatever. You organize your cooperation between the squads and the tribes. And on the horizontal layer, you have the chapters. The chapters are within the tribe. You have the guilds who are crossing the different tribes. When I was young, we used to call this a matrix organization. It is you have a vertical line and a horizontal line, and we were very good at having those type of things, 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional matrix organization. And in fact, officially, the goal of those guilds and those chapters is to share knowledge, to create tools, to create training material, conduct trainings, set standards and practices, review changes in approach of technology or taken outside in view of the system. And it was designed, very consciously designed by the people from work on the Agile organization to be for people who are full in a squad. Now, this is not the case for most of the IT architects. They are not dedicated, or they're working only in the squad, because in fact you want them also to belong to your guild, chapter, center of competence, or whatever you call it, or maybe it's a different organizational unit. You have a support tribe where IT architecture can be. It doesn't matter. There are many versions possible. Now, what we create with a guild, and if you have a guild or something like that for IT architects, we have given this poor IT architect a place to belong, a second place, because that's what a guild is. In essence, a guild is a place to belong, to share your belonging based on your profession and your skills, to meet people who think the same as you, who act the same as you, who have the same basic concerns, and they know and they understand you, and it feels like home. And it creates an interesting situation, because the IT architect now, he belongs to two groups. He belongs to the squad where he's in and where he's working, but he also belongs to that IT architecture guild, and has a dual belonging. Now, dual belonging to groups, of course, is something that we all have because we are part of many groups. But the interesting thing is that in the positive side, this dual belonging creates a crossroads for passing information. So the IT architecture profession can give the information to the squad, and from the squad the grassroots thing can go up to IT architecture, and you can discuss. This is the ideal, perfect situation. But sometimes a dual belonging also leads to a conflict of interest. You say, okay, the squad wants to deliver it now in this sprint, and IT architect says, no, you first have to do this and this and this. And there is a timing constraint, or there's a budget constraint, or there is whatever type of constraint. And we know that those conflicts exist and that they happen a lot. Now, what you see happening then is this. Somebody puts the lock on the fence. That means that, and I've seen this happening, that architects are easily pushed out of the group that is trying to do self-organizing whatever it needs to do. It's called othering. It's called, okay, the IT architect, in fact, IT architecture has no place in Agile. This IT architect doesn't understand Agile. He doesn't understand this business. He doesn't know the people are good enough. He's not there enough. And in fact, he is not part of our squad. We push him out, and then there we are. We have a very unhappy IT architect. So if anything, an IT architecture in an Agile world, he is a likely victim of this othering, of this bullying, which puts him in a very, very sad situation, because what can he do? He can run home to the guild and say, that squad doesn't want to work, that tribe doesn't want to do. So what can you do? What is your obligation as managers of IT architecture or as IT architect? You need to give yourself a position. Because he can do two things. Then he can adapt. He can say, I want to be part of this squad because this is my daily life. So yes, we will go and we will pipe and we will fix it afterwards, and which will never happen. But anyway, we agree and we bury our principles, and that's it. Or you give him a marginal, but an accepted role to be the wise old man, or like in this picture, the witch of the group. You know, the witch is a very interesting position, because outside and inside the group, And she's the one you go to when you don't know, when you're lost, when you don't know what to do, you're really ill and you need some herbs to get cured. And when it's difficult, you go to the witch. That was the role of the witch. And in fact, that's also more or less the role of the IT architect, or the one that he can take. And you as management, you need to enable that an IT architect takes this role. So you need to be conscious that you need to give authority to the IT architect who is out there in the wild, in those squads, in those tribes. Now you need to build bridges, and those bridges, you can do that, and you still need to do that like we did in the waterfall, in the old world, the Machiavelli stuff. You make their contribution mandatory, their sign-off mandatory. If it's not approved, then it will not go through. You need to organize governance boards. You need to pay these architects better so that people compensate for the fact that they are out there alone and that their skills are very important, and you make that visible. All this thing is the old world, the Machiavelli answer to this bridge. Now in Agile, this is not enough. You also need to have the pull. And the pull is you need to build the cross ties between architectural community and the rest of IT. So you need to explain, you need to convince, and like we call that in change management, you need to first create awareness that there is a need for it, tying it up to the overall architecture, to the goals, to the purpose of the company, if purpose is your cultural thing. And then you need to create a desire. You need to make it sexy. You need to make it, well, it's good things. Those witches are not that bad. We don't need to burn them. We need to love them. That's what we need. And in any case, for that, you need to go public. You need to make sure that you do not look like a sect, that you do not look like something which is so complex that you poor ITer, you poor user, you will never understand this, because then you will not give the full authority to the IT architect in your Agile organization. And this is a key thing. So in fact, what you need to do is for the IT architect, you need to build a home where they can play this chess game and feel at home and be nice, and can go out there back to the real world of the Agile squads and do what they need to do. So the takeaways of my short, and I try to make it short so that we can have the right time for the ING people. The takeaways is IT architects are human beings, and the other people in IT as well. They will behave as humans, and human behavior is a complex system. So it is complex, but it's not ununderstandable. Nobody, not even not even Bart van Passel, nobody wants to be isolated and alone all of the time. I had this discussion with him. Thirdly, group cohesion can be organized. In fact, that's what Agile does very explicitly with the squads and the tribes and the way it all does. And you can do that as well. You need to do that you can design that. Dual belonging, being part of an architecture guild and being part of a delivery team or a squad or a tribe or whatever, is a blessing and a curse. But you need to think about it. You need to give the IT architect the means and the help that for him or her to succeed. Now there's one last takeaway, is that IT architects, you do not select them on their understanding of human behavior as a system. You select them on their other qualities. So, but this is something IT architects can understand. It is not far away from their way of thinking, if you take it like system dynamics and a complex system. So you need to develop their knowledge, their understanding, their feeling for what is happening, what type of dynamic is in my squad or the tribe where I'm working, what is happening there, are they doing othering, is there somebody doing this? Go one back. This feeling is something you can develop, that you can train. I know this is called soft skills, but the one who started calling these soft skills, well, he made a big mistake, and I think I would fire him, because these are very hard to get and very important skills to have if you are in that dual belonging difficult group situation, as most architects in Agile are. Now, the good thing is that we discovered, while we were preparing this, that ING, in fact, ticks a lot of those boxes. So it is not impossible. And if I say, well, it can be designed, then I'm happy to give the floor to Benoit and Thierry to show you that they designed this, that they actually did this with a lot of success and a lot of good things happening. That was it for me, Bart. Over to you.
Right, thanks a lot, Dirk. You're clearly an excellent storyteller, which is also important for architects.
Oh yes, I'm a writer as well, so if you can still buy a book.
Yes, indeed. We can follow you on LinkedIn on your announcements there as well on your production there. Thanks a lot. Then I give the word to Benoit and Thierry.
Yeah, thank you, Dirk, for your presentation.
And thank you, XPlus, for giving us the spotlight today.
So Dirk's views on the social and psychological aspects of building a community allow us now to share our practical recipe to build an even stronger community by communicating with a purpose. But first of all, who are we? So Thierry and myself are architects at ING.
And together with a few other colleagues, we initiated what we call the Editorial Room in 2017. Over time, we realized that it's a bit unique and it's worth sharing outside of ING. So today we are happy to be here to give you some practical tips and tricks and explain the foundation of the model we discovered.
Yeah, in fact, we hope this will trigger you to experiment in your organization. And yeah, you can even invite us later on when we are finished this call to discuss it more in details.
A bit of context. ING always had international collaborations, of course, but things really changed with the major global reorganization that happened in 2016, because it started to concern each and every architect around the world. Belgium and the Netherlands needed to unite and thus act as one team, which is much more demanding than the usual cross-border collaborations from the past.
Yeah, and also the concept of one, as we call it, was pushed even further from the group. So that means becoming really one bank and one platform. That's really the ambition. So that means also the all architects had to virtually, of course, regroup into a global architecture function to build the foundations of the one bank of tomorrow. And of course, this is full of challenges. We want to hear from our chief architect, Rudy, and we recorded a small video that explains it. So he will explain how the strategy move led into the rise of the editorial room concept that we are going to explain.
A practical tips: if you cannot see fit to frame with the do your thing baseline at the side of the frame, then please right click on the current video and select fit to frame.
We had a program Unite and we wanted to create one platform for two banks. And for that, we actually integrated the delivery teams of the two countries and also the architecture teams, leading to around 80 architects for the whole that needed to work together to come to one platform. So communicating and understanding what everybody is doing is of most important for the mutual respect, for knowing who is doing what and so on. The point was, the better people know each other, the less you have this problem of being in two different teams originally. The moment we saw that we needed to reach other people, we started to think about this in a wider concept, because at some point we also discovered that some people are not interested in some of the techniques, channels that we use. So some people don't like to watch videos, others don't like to be on WhatsApp, was one of the cases, I believe, and so on. So slowly we started to understand that, oh, so maybe you're not reaching some of the people just because of the way the communication has been done. And that led to the idea that maybe we need to have the same information in different ways communicated over different channels, or select the right channel for the right type of information and even audience.
As Rudy explains, the editorial room is about building an efficient manner of communicating the relevant information to the person. How do we do this? We never force people to use a channel. Instead, we try to provide the channel owners with the right content. So, we build on the concept of channel owners. We'll come back on that role later. But let's have a look at the achievement of the editorial room. Benoit, you're on mute.
We can explain the achievements of the editorial room that will put in perspective what we do with the channel owner. Actually, we have different types of channel. One is called the Blueprint. It's a monthly email newsletter. We have 250 plus opt-in readers, so that means they ask us to receive the information. We didn't push it to them. And in that we have more than half of the people who are non-architects, and also so engineering, customer journey experts, also IT leads, tribe leads. So people also in the management have asked to receive our information. And since a year now, he's been consistently publishing a newsletter every month with the team who is behind it. Another one, which is very new, a bit exclusive announcement for you, the Architecture Week. We are going to run it next week, or in 2 weeks, sorry. It's a week of conferences, 30-45 minutes over the course of a week online, inviting all people in IT, so Tech Benelux, in Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. And we are inviting 4,000 people. And we do that with a very small team. I'm running the Spark, which is a quarterly online event. Of course, also due to the physical distance, because we are inviting all architects globally, so that means above 350 invitees. The Architecture TV, Thierry is running this channel in Microsoft Stream, so the YouTube equivalent, if you didn't know, internal streaming platform, followed by architects, and also architects, and in fact, anyone who wants to follow can follow that stream. And the architecture community meeting, the ACOM as we call it, is a monthly event. We already run 34 sessions of those, inviting the architects from Belgium and Netherlands. Also growing outside of Belgium and Netherlands, inviting international colleagues and outside of architecture. And it's where all this started, in fact.
Also notice that if you ask two architects about the editorial room, very few will know. What they do know are the channels, because the editorial room is behind the curtains. It lets circulate all sorts of information to feed the channel owners with the right content for their audience.
Yeah, on that, let's hear from the editorial room participants, channel owners themselves, what they have to say about it. We have a short video, about 3 minutes, that Thierry will launch now.
Yeah, well, first of all, I really like the concept of the editorial room. And yeah, so I do think it really helps, at least for myself, that the feeling of being part of a community that really helped. I always come back from the editorial room with more information than I had when I entered.
It allows me to get news and information from different horizons, global as well as local, that I would otherwise have more difficulty, or that I should make more research to find it.
By endorsing the editorial room principle, all the hierarchical line, let's say like that, have endorsed that the community of architects are free to manage their own communication to ING.
But of course, the editorial room really tries to do is streamline the information and get things together. And there you see a difference than it was before. And of course, it can always be better, because I think there is still a lot of information sources that we somehow miss. But as soon as the news is there, it is shared in the editorial room. And of course, because you have some discussion on the topic, then the news becomes a bit into the context, and that really helps.
It was actually surprising to me how well it worked. First of all, I saw that there was motivation of some of the architects to work on it, to participate. Everybody can contribute content, but I was amazed of the motivation of some people to produce content and the willingness also to participate in that. Consuming information is one thing and can be interesting and motivating, but being able to share content and maybe even getting feedback on it from other people is also motivating.
It's really a facilitator, and it helps in the velocity of the information circulation.
And what surprised me is that we reach a really high level of subscriber, and even more, we see that we have, for example, more leaders, IT leaders, involving in that newsletter. So it means we finally reach our audience, and the audience is coming to us. That's even more important.
But to me, the added value is really in streamlining, have one central place to collect the news. That's really, for me, the added value of the editorial room.
Other people than architects are subscribing to it, which is also interesting to see. Oh, there is an interest in these topics. So outside of the architecture community, it's very interesting. I also used it myself for sharing some of the ideas, maybe not in an official way. And okay, that's an easy way to communicate to a broader audience some ideas without that it has to be an official meeting.
There is always a little bit of concurrence, because each channel owner is really involved, and so wants each channel to be not the most or the first one, but at least to be recognized. And in the same time, the place of the editorial room, let's say, is also to remind us that no, we are deserving the same goal. But that's not important that a subject is addressed in one or the other channel, if at least we achieve the fact that the audience receive the message.
And because you hear a little bit more than before, of course, it's easy for you to flow that information back to the chapter, or bring information from the chapter to the editorial room and use it as a way to spread the news. So
you can generate, architects can generate their own channels. And from that, that's what give me, I would say, the first kick, the spark to say, okay, we need a newsletter. And we need a newsletter with architectural content to all the community.
As you can see, channels is a well-established notion in ING, in architecture, of course. It's fundamental to communicate. Saying, yeah, let's communicate or let's have a conversation is not actionable enough. It could be about anything. It's enjoyable, but it's lacking something. It's lacking a purpose. Today's presentation is titled Recipe to Communicate about Architecture with a Purpose. It's because we discovered that purposeful communication is much more powerful than communication sent by I don't know who for I don't know why. Tailored information shared by a well-intended channel owner who really has a continuous dialogue with his audience improves the relevance of the information he shares, and thus creates a stronger community.
Yeah, and as we see, we have a number of channels, and we also have a clear purpose at ING, which is empowering people to stay a step ahead in life and in business. And also really gave us a strong purpose for architecture, which is to set the standard in the world for architecting in an agile way in a big and regulated company. That's his purpose that he shared with us, and we aligned to it because it's really a strong statement for us. And in the between of the channels and the purpose, we position the editorial room as the way of communicating with the purpose, on the purpose. And so the editorial room also has its own purpose, which is to share pertinent information with architects and their friends, as we like to put it, inside and outside of architecture, inside and outside of ING, which is also why we are here today, using multi-channel and multimedia communication. And with that, sorry, I need to go to the next. We want to share some principles.
Yes, because along the way, the concept was becoming clearer to Benoit and myself. We explained the fundamental principles to the channel owners, and we discovered some more in the dialogue with them. The first and basic one is less is more. We take inspiration from professionals, but we don't overdo it. Finally, isn't it the imperfections that make the things lovely? Also, we don't make it a full-time job. And we act seriously, but of course, we never forget to have fun.
Yeah, and also in the communication itself, less is more. And you can't force feed people with your information. That's really counterproductive. But adapting to your audience doesn't mean that you have to lose yourself and lose your audience in fragmented channels. That's why we have this principle of prudent approach in new channel creation. And we put the community at the center. We have the motto, by the community, for the community. So the chiefs and the managers are welcome, but they are part of the community.
And within that community, we empower the channel owners. Even if we have the editorial room, there is no central authority. We take the risk they will not pass the message exactly as we wanted. But we find that by sharing the vision and strategy of the editorial room, they intuitively make the right choices. And they align with each other. That's the principle of federated cooperation for autonomy. We empower channel owners to be autonomous and align with each other, but also have a team with them to avoid it's a single person effort. And we help channel owners to cooperate, and certainly not to compete with each other for exclusive content. That's not in the interest of the community. And then, last but not least, my preferred one, the YouTuber model. The channel owners are motivated people who want to express something. It's their channel purpose. We give them feedback, but we do not impose or overrule their selection process. And it's really harder than you think. In the end, you don't dictate to a YouTuber to communicate about something. So why would you do that inside your enterprise? You can ask him, but you will never force him.
So to explain how it works, we think the communication and the dialogue are in fact in an infinite loop of communication and of continuous improvement. And how do you know that the information was useful for your audience? Well, you just ask them, or even better, you talk to them about your channel purpose. And this results in even more insightful discussions. So it's a top priority for a channel owner to define his channel purpose and to maintain a continuous feedback loop with their audience. And who's the audience? Well, we said it. It's the community of architects and their friends. It's going beyond architecture community and it's going beyond ING. And we don't want simply to inform them, but we want them to spread the word and to grow the community with us.
Therefore, we need to find the right sources of information. We make sure those are connected with the editorial room, so the channel owners can select what they know is relevant for their audience. So if channels are central to the model, the true heroes are the channel owners. And to help them, the editorial room removes duplicate efforts in finding and filtering the content. Channel owners not only have dialogues with their audience, but also with other channel owners and with the sources of information. So we also see that the editorial room has a network effect. And when you align that network with the architecture strategy and behind with the company strategy, it's impossible to fail.
So trying to conclude, some benefits that we see of following this editorial room vision. We installed a system really that builds a community who amplifies the architecture strategy. The collaborative approach helps the channel owners survive. That's very important for the sustainability of your communication. Survive after the people who created it and who initiated it. And when we empower the channel owners, they will take action to meet their audience needs. You don't have to tell them, and they will take action that you would never have thought about.
Also, share the vision. Don't control the plans. Everywhere also, there is latent leadership skills. Give them a chance to become the channel owners. Think platform and let content creators to meet their audience.
And before we leave, a bonus. We are architects, so we couldn't resist to make a model of the editorial room. So in another discussion, we can dig into it, but we even had fun making an information model.
And let's say that we architected the architecture's communication. Alors, there is so much more that we could tell. If you have any interest, please invite us. We are available. So it's Benoit and myself. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for your participation and open to question.
Yeah, thank you. And back to you, Bart.
Thanks a lot, Thierry and Benoit, for this refreshing perspective. I'm quite sure that for a lot of you, this is rather novel, and so indeed reach out to one another to stand on each other's shoulders. We can all benefit from that. There was a question from Mark regarding which content is discussed in which channel. Was that answered already in the meantime, Mark, or?
Yeah, the short to that, I think, is the channel purpose. And also the editorial line. We didn't mention that here, but for each channel there is this sort of editorial line that you know what you can expect as content, and this is disclosed to the subscribers. They know the content, if it's text, if it's video, the format. They know the content, if it's architecture or if it's other, and they know the frequency also, so they can a bit manage their agenda. This is disclosed in advance, and this is very important. And then the content itself is really decided by the channel owner.
Exactly.
Because he has the purpose for his channel, he knows the content that he wants to push forward in constant dialogue with the audience and with the editorial room, so that we can feed him with the right content that will suit the audience needs.
Mark, is that an answer to your question?
Yes, but I was also interested, but I think it's beyond the scope of this session, is you have certain goals, and which channel is then best appropriate to serve with goal. For example, I think spreading right company information you can do by video, by interviews, but when you, for example, want to share knowledge about craftsmanship, more interaction maybe is good to raise questions, to sharpen the content. And that's maybe more better to do it in a collaborative team meeting or so.
Alors, it really depends. Benoit, yeah, if you don't mind, I would like to go for that one. First of all, we tried to build the communication metrics, to identify the topics, and for which channel the topics was the most, let's say, applicable. But we stopped with that. Just first of all, it helped initially to understand exactly what kind of information we had to transfer or to convey. But at the end, it's unmaintainable. It's way too much changing on a daily basis that we stopped with that. What we are trying to do in the editorial room in place of that is to make sure that the sources, like you said, the human resources, for instance, are connected with the channel owners, and then the channel owners decide themselves about the format they will use in their channels. Because the channels is not only a meeting. I will give you a very concrete example. Benoit spoke about the ACOM, which is the architecture community meeting. In fact, they are using WhatsApp to advertise the people that the meeting will be held on that day, but they are also flowing information via the different medium. We call them medium. They are sending mails, they are sending mailing lists, they are communicating on Yammer, but then the ACOM is choosing what's the best medium to share what kind of information. And that's totally applicable for all the channel owners present in the editorial room.
Okay, thanks a lot. yeah, I noticed that Dirk was still mentioning something, but he was on mute. I propose that we postpone the discussion to in another format, also via another channel. You will all receive next week an email with the link to the presentations, and do follow us on LinkedIn, where we will also send communications on further webinars. Thanks a lot for your participation. Thanks to Dirk, thanks Thierry and Benoit, and also all the other people at ING who contributed to this. And I look forward to meeting you at another webinar. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Bye all. Thank you, Bart.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.